What? Hello, everybody. My name is Scott Kelly, the founder and CEO of Black Dog Venture Partners, and I'm really excited to have this topic discussed today. And as to those that know me, we work with a lot of startups and helping them do three things: one, raise capital for their startup; two, grow their startup; and three, do both at the same time. And what I've found, and when you're running your business, some things slip through the cracks, especially with you tech companies out there. And one of those things that you really got to be cognizant of is making sure you keep your cyber security risks at a minimal, maintain data privacy, and be able to make sure you can run your business without a hiccup. So again, I am excited to introduce my friend and the founder and CEO of Jun Cyber, Wilson Bautista. I'm going to throw his contact information in chat just a minute, but I'm going to give him the floor now. Wilson, welcome.
Awesome. Hey, Scott, thanks again for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to meet everybody. Let me go ahead and set up my screen and just let me know when you guys can see it.
You're good.
Okay, awesome. All right, so my name is Wilson Batista. I am the CEO of June Cyber. Our company is a compliance-focused managed service provider. We do IT, cybersecurity, and we really mainly focus on compliance. And what does that mean? That means like if you're a SaaS company, SOC 2. If you are a medical company, HIPAA. So we understand those rules and we understand the technical requirements that are surrounding those particular frameworks. And so we say proactivity, it's ahead of times, ahead of threats. We are the resilience standard, and we make sure that stuff gets done in regards to cybersecurity compliance. And when we think about cybersecurity, everybody's like, oh, it's just, we need to turn on the firewall or we need to make sure that we have antivirus. But cybersecurity in itself is not just an IT problem, it is a business problem because startups rarely have cybersecurity problems because they don't own enough security tools. They have problems because they haven't made fundamental decisions about specific things like customer data, access, the cloud infrastructure, software development, vendors, recovery, incident response. So security affects your ability to sell to enterprise buyers, scale operations, pass investor diligence, and survive disruption. So what we're going to do today is we're going to try to answer a few questions and give you a few tips about what I've seen specifically with SaaS companies, and what SaaS companies come up with when they say from their customers, send us your SOC 2 report. If you can't send your SOC 2 report, guess what happens? You end up at the bottom of the list, or you're going to try to scramble to figure out how you could get your SOC 2, and that's not what we want to happen. We want to build a sustainable compliance program so that you could get your SOC 2 Type 2 audit done and it won't be such a headache. So, 10 questions will come at the end of this, and they should be answering the 10 corresponding tips that I'll provide during the presentation. So, tip number one is SOC 2, start the SOC 2 process before someone asks, right? So in SOC 2, you need to define what your systems are that are going to be handling the information that needs to be protected. So what are those systems and what systems are critical to your organization? We need to understand where the data is, how you're protecting it. You need to understand who has access. You need to understand all the vendors that you're using to make sure your application or your service possible. So, for example, like maybe you're using Datadog, right? You're going to be using Google Cloud platform, right? You need to understand those vendors. You need to have their SOC 2 reports. You need to make sure that you do due diligence on them. How changes are made. This is a really big one that a lot of folks, especially in the startup world, as they scale, especially in vibe coding right now, is that like I need to make a change, I need to make a feature, I'm just going to do it. SOC 2, make sure that there's some considerations and that there's approvals. So you need to be able to explain that. So how are changes controlled? What happens if there's an incident, right? And we'll go over this later. And then can we prove that all of these things happen? So yes, from a technical side, you could have your logs, but you need to have your policies, your procedures in place, not just this documentation, but you actually need to be doing it. So think about these things before they actually become a requirement for SOC 2 when you're getting ready for it. Okay, so knowing where your data goes, ask yourself, where is our customer's data right now? Is it all over the place, or is it in a single database, or is it just in a few places? So do an inventory of your data, understand what you collect and where it's stored, understand how it's processed and who can access it. All right. And then if you have other organizations that are attached to your data, understand which third-party vendors receive this information. So if you have an API and you're going back and forth, understand what that entails, understand the scope of that, and make sure that it's locked down appropriately. And then a life cycle. We talk about data retention a lot. So how long do you retain the data, and then how does it get deleted? So you should map your real data flow. Visualizing the data pathways is essential for regulatory compliance and threat surface reduction. So understanding your customer, how they interact with your app, how it interacts with the infrastructure and the database, knowing all of that will help you scope what needs to be protected. All right. Tip number three. This your stack is your attack surface. So if you're using Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace, if you're using Azure, if you're using Google Cloud, GitHub, Slack, Notion, HubSpot, all of these tools that you're using to build your application are your attack surface, right? So, for example, if you have Microsoft 365 or you're using Google, and you don't have multi-factor authentication, um, and you have SSO on your app, and you are an admin for that app, so what happens is that if somebody knows your username and password, they're going to be able to have administrative access to your app. And that's not what you want to do. So you want to make sure that you have um, baseline security put in place for all of these different applications in your stack so that you reduce your attack surface. So the question is, who has the authoritative list of every application connected to the company data? So you should know every connected app. You should know and understand and approve the people that have access to these applications. And you should evaluate what applications have access to these things and understand the permissions that they could do with this data. Integrate, mandate single sign-on, right? And multi-factor authentication. And you should always be able to review OAuth permissions. And then as people onboard and offboard or transfer, you need to be able to update their permissions or revoke their access upon exit. And that's with all your applications. Okay, identity is one of the first things that we talk about in regards to the new security perimeter. So if your lead developer leaves today, can you remove all of their access within 30 minutes? So we've all heard the stories about a disgruntled employee having access to systems after they were terminated and everything IP was gone. So how do you reduce that? How do you reduce that risk? And part of it is making sure that applications are connected to a centralized identity provider, right? Making sure that MFA is everywhere. We had talked about the reasons for that. SSO for critical systems, that they don't have access to shared accounts. And if they do have access to shared accounts, that the password gets rolled, right? Password gets changed. Um, they should have separate administrative accounts, and those administrative accounts should be locked down and paused and disabled. You should practice least privilege, right? Not making sure that one developer doesn't own everything, is that they own a subset of capabilities or permissions. that they only have the permissions that they need, right? Not open wide permissions to everything. And that you actually look at everybody that's in your staff, everybody that's on your staff as far as employees, contractors, third-party providers, and look at them at a regular frequency. So maybe that is at the beginning quarterly, but as you grow in size, maybe you have a team that can actually put some effort into this, and you do it monthly, so that you look at what they're doing and make sure that the permissions that they have to do their job are the right amount. And if there's any excess, that it's trimmed away. And then we finally talk about documented onboarding and offboarding procedures. I think that's really important to make sure that as you align and define the permission, the roles and responsibilities of the individual, that you have a proper onboarding and offboarding documentation that says these are the permissions that they were given on onboarding. These are the permissions that you need to make sure that are taken away when they are offboarded. So that's tip number 4. Okay, so protect your cloud and protect your code. How many people can push directly to production? So, source code, we need to enforce branch protection, require pull reviews, and restricted repository permissions. So again, like in the age of vibe coding, we need to make sure that like somebody's reviewing their stuff, your code before it gets pushed to production. So if everybody can push code, then you don't have control, and you're going to end up maybe putting something malicious on your application, and that's not going to be good. Your CI/CD pipeline, protect build pipelines and control automated deployment credentials. And then your cloud environment goes back to infrastructure, enforce least privilege, make sure that only the people that need to touch the infrastructure or your cloud environment are the ones that need to have those permissions put together. And then have a separate production environment in comparison to your dev and your test environment. And always, despite regardless of environment, prod, test, or dev, enable audit logging so you can see who's doing what within your infrastructure. Here's one that we see a lot, especially with Claude Code, is that you have people that put their API keys in their repos, and in GitHub they have their repos public. So that is not where your credential should live, right? So credential should not live in your source code. You should not be putting API keys in Slack or Teams. You shouldn't be sending those in emails or having shared documents or environment files committed to repositories like GitHub and in your developer notes. They should be separate in a secrets manager. There are plenty of different tools that you can use to manage all of your secrets. So make sure that you have a scanning capability within your repositories. I know GitHub has a tool, and SonarQube also has tools that look for credentials within the code. But we want to make sure that you do that. So a remediation baseline is like I said before, is that you need to have a secret management platform, which like AWS has Secrets Manager. Same with Google Cloud. There's also Vault. You should have automated repo scanning for Git secrets. And then if you do see that there are any API keys or any secrets that are in these places, whatever service or whatever account that they're associated with, you need to immediately rotate the key. So whoever has that exposed key can't do whatever that service account or whatever that account associated with that current key has capability of. All right, design for human error, right? This is something that we see all the time, especially if you're in big companies. You always get those phishing email um, tests, right? So you got to assume that as you grow and you scale, that people are going to do things that you would think is common sense that they wouldn't do, but they do it anyways. Like assume someone's going to click on something, right? So assume that someone's going to click. Training employees is vital, but it's not the architecture, right? So training is like the first layer of defense, but you need to make sure that as you are building out your organization, that you start putting things in place that if they do click, that the blast radius is minimized, right? And you do this through email security controls. You make sure that your DMARC records to make sure that you are flagging for spam right at the beginning before it gets to the user. And then if they do click, even though they click on something, that multi-factor authentication is enforced. So even if they did get the username and password for somebody, that they are lacking like the person's phone for the authentication app that's going to give them the one-time password, right? And then even if they get past that, if they try to install something onto the laptops, that you have endpoint protection or EDR on their laptops so that it will stop any kind of malicious app from running. And then even if that all fails, you have this next layer, is least privilege and monitoring, is making sure that that user only has the permissions that they need to do their job. And if they have that, if they're not an admin and they can't do admin things, then you reduce that blast radius. So if they have admin and have admin things and they get past all of that, then that's an incident that needs to be worked on very fairly quickly. So the core principle here is that one human mistake should never become a company-ending event. So this is why I just talked about and walked through defense in depth. Defense in depth ensures containment. So if we search our Git history today, what will we find? If we searched through our logs and our security logs, what will we find? We want to make sure that we set up our architecture, not just from an application point of view, but from a company point of view, is we create layers of defense to reduce the blast radius and always account for human error. Okay. So if your production environment disappears tonight, when are your customers back online? This is really one of those things that if you are developing at your house and you are not working on a cloud environment, that you have to be able to come back online quickly. So in cybersecurity terms, we talk about recovery point objective. How much data can you, how much data loss can you afford? And recovery time objective. How long can you afford to be down? Right? So every minute you're down, you're losing revenue. And you want to be able to ensure that you're able to come back online as soon as possible. So understanding your RPO and RTO are very important, and being able to back up your data and back up your operational code to come back online is going to be important. So it's not just having the backup, right? It's making sure that you have the backup and that you can actively restore it and quickly once you know that there's a disruption. So it's not just having a backup, it's being able to come back online as soon as possible. Those are considerations you need to think about here. Okay, an incident response plan. Let's just keep this simple, right? It does not need to be 70 pages. We talk about this all the time in the defense sector, is that you need to have an incident response plan in case anything happens. And the best way to plan for an incident is not to actually go through the incident, but you have to look at the scenarios in which would be applicable for an incident to happen for your organization. So, for example, you're in a medical company, right? Somebody takes patient health information, right, out of the secure space and has, breached that protocol. What do you do, right? And you don't need to make this difficult. You just make sure that you have a process to make sure that the proper steps have been taken to reduce and reduce the incident's effects and inform the people that need to know and report the incident to whoever it needs to go to. So who's your call tree? Who's your incident commander? Who takes over all charge of an incident when it happens? When it comes to a specific technical thing that happens, like a website comes down, who investigates the root cause? Comms and legal. So this is where it becomes not just the technical thing, it's becoming an administrative. Like this is where you have your marketing team, your communications team, your legal counsel. Who notifies these people, right? And what is their role? Shutdown authority, who can cut production offline? And then if normal systems are compromised, how are you going to communicate? So understanding who's in your call tree, right? When something goes down, understanding if there's a technical issue, who's going to be responsible for that, making sure that your administrative personnel understand what their roles and responsibility are, and that if something, at what point do we shut down everything? And then again, the if email is down, how are you going to communicate? And that is what a one-page incident response plan looks like. It doesn't need to be too difficult, but you just need to be able to put that together. And after you put that together, you need to test it, right? So you need to get all of these people together and say, hey, our production application went down because of this. And then you execute. And this is called a tabletop exercise. So you should at least do the incident response tabletop exercise annually so you could ensure that the people that have roles and responsibilities to your incident response plan actually understand the roles and responsibilities. And then you could see how well it goes. And then after that, and this is also part of SOC 2, you need to have a lessons learned. What did you learn about this tabletop exercise that went well? What went well or what did not go well? All right. What are we going to do to improve this so we can continuously improve? So this is, yes, a one-page incident response plan, and these are from follow-on actions after that. Okay, last tip here. So you need to build security that scales, right? Like you can't think about security as like you're protecting 1,000 people because sometimes it's just not gonna be like that. Um, if you have 1 to 10 employees right now, you could focus on your identity, making sure that you understand who are the users on the applications that you're using to build your startup. You can make sure that if it is organizational equipment that you are um, issuing out that they have endpoint security. You can make sure that backups are done and that if you are using a cloud infrastructure for your application or for anything, is that you have the basic security done. But as you scale out, you're going to need to be able to have policies, procedures, and you want to be able to have logging in place so you could see if there's an incident amongst those 25 employees that you could take action on. Um, we see a lot of folks that are about 25 to 50 employees needing the SOC 2, but that could be 1 to 10 employees. It just depends. But as you grow, you want to make sure that your security operational capability scales with your company. And if you're small and you continue to be small and you need to be able to also show maturity with all of these things that I have listed here. So don't install a 500-person enterprise bureaucracy at 10 employees. Match your security maturity to your growth stage, contractual obligations, and actual data risk, because the goal is appropriate risk-based security, not bureaucratic friction. Okay, and here's another one. AI just changed your data boundary. So your employees are already using generative AI. So what happens when someone uploads customer data into an AI platform? This is where your incident response policy and plan come into place. Um, you want, and this is future state. You want to think about how AI tools are being used and whether or not you want to officially approve them as an organization. Um, what company or customer data can employees provide to these tools? Do you want them uploading code to these tools and having them fix it? Or is there an intermediate, is there something that uh, uh, cleans the code so it doesn't contain like any secrets? Can developers submit proprietary source code? What I just talked about. What happens to prompt logs and uploaded files? So AI governance is a thing now, and it's becoming more and more prevalent in organizations. So it's no longer a separate issue. It's a core part of data governance. Okay. So these are the 10 questions that these 10 tips kind of align to. So making sure that you understand each of these questions will help you build out your company to be more secure. And as you are scaling, just ensure that the capability that you're providing for security is maturing with your organization. All right, so security empowers growth. Build security that empowers growth. Maturity isn't measured by how many security tools you purchase. It's measured by whether you can prove your resilience to customers, investors, and partners. Okay, Scott, that's my presentation.
Fantastic. Thanks, Wilson, for that. So if you have a question, if you can use the raise hand function in chat, or you can post your question in chat. Wilson, I'm going to talk from a complete non-technical layman. Okay. Um, I see everyone's talking about, SOC 2 compliance. What is SOC 2? And why is it important? And when do you need it?
Okay. Whew. SOC 2 compliance is a control framework, right? And it's a control framework that is testing a few things. And I'm going to try to keep this in layman terms. You have a trust criteria, and the most
Mhm.
important one, the first one, is security. Are you meeting these common criteria for security? Right. And the reason why it's important is because it go through your entire system, your entire organization to make sure that everybody is aligned and doing what they need to do to protect customer information. So it is a basic set of requirements to be able to show to an auditor that my application, my organization are doing these things, so you can be assured that we are protecting your information.
No, I appreciate that. And the reason I asked that question, Wilson, is that, as you know, and several on this call know, my work is working with entrepreneurs to properly prepare them and get in front of investors. And part of the due diligence process is having SOC 2 compliance if you're building something that they're going to invest in. So I wanted to make sure people on this call not only knew what it was, but knew the importance of it, not just from a development and a protection standpoint, but really as a due diligence checkpoint that a lot of investors, look for. So we got a question, Azelle. You can unmute yourself, and why don't we take one question at a time, and then we'll go from there. Go ahead, Azelle.
Hi, Scott. Thank you. And sorry I'm mobile right now. I'm actually real time going through identity theft and data breach. So I'm going to the T-Mobile to I had to secure my devices, accounts, and everything. And they got me really good. So my question was, so I had a data breach with my cell phone company, and then also somebody hijacked my eSIM and
Okay.
cloned my phone. I do a lot of mobile work because I'm a community consultant. Um, so I'm on the move a lot, and I'm in the community a lot. So I'm you know I'm mobile a lot. So I did not know that they can clone a phone, and literally, I literally did not know that they can do that. They were watching everything I was doing, my pictures. They're emailing me.
So So, Azelle, why don't we do this? Why don't we break this into pieces? Wilson, why don't you talk about, obviously, from two standpoints, how you can solve this problem, and two, how you can avoid it from happening in the future.
Right. Well, I think that's well, the answer to the way that I would respond would be the answer for both of those questions, right? So eSIM cloning is a thing, right? And it's what hackers are doing to bypass two-factor authentication, right? If they could get you to click on something, right, they just take your eSIM, they clone it, and now those all those one-time passwords that gets sent to your phone as text, they get sent to them, right? So the question that I would have is, how did they get there, right? And part of it may be you received a text and you clicked something, a link that you may have allowed some application to copy your stuff. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but that's typically what I see is that they send a text message with a link to go to and say, "Oh, hey, yeah, you have a security breach and you need to download this application and you need to download it and then you need to give permission to everything." Like just say it because I have an Android phone. Say, "Oh, download this app and then give permissions to XYZ." So you probably did something like that by accident, and that's how the eSIM copying happen. So how do you do this? Is like you first off, you have to make sure. How do you prevent this? Is you need to make sure that you do not click on any links from any numbers that you do not know, right? You, that's part one. And if you do, like look for the telltale sign, like, oh yeah, you have a security breach, right? That's what you typically see. And then it's like you need to download this thing. And that's telltale number sign number two is they're going to tell you that, and then if you actually do it, it's like, all right, now like you've allowed access. It's like you may have lost your eSIM for good, right? And you need to change over everything, and that's the most hurtful part. So that's how I would handle that, and that's what I would recommend.
Okay, thank
Awesome.
you.
Yes.
So I did that. This is a two-step question. So I did that, and so I'm an iPhone user. So through my iPhones, they lock me out of my iClouds, change my password, security questions, kick me out, and I had to go through a recovery process for 30 days. Open a new iCloud, couldn't gain access to nothing. They took over my social media pages, messaging me and messaging me from my other pages, um, telling me that I needed to pay them money. Basically they were extorting me.
Yeah,
Extorting
yeah.
me.
And so that I'm glad you mentioned that question because that brings up another point that is becoming pretty prevalent. And then as I'm going to take a couple other questions after this, but what about hackers that are charge ransom and want to take advantage of you? I believe this is what Zell and probably a lot of other folks have dealt with. Talk to us about one again, how to prevent that, Wilson, and two, how to react to that.
Right. So it's difficult because you think that when you see and you hear these things happen, it's only on the news to these big organizations, but it's happening to everyday people, right?
Mhm.
Like use case right now, someone's extorting a Zelle at the moment. And the choice is you either pay, right? Or you have to move on, right? You have to change everything. And that it just sucks to say that, but it's just like they're going to extort you for as long as they can, and and they're going to probably give you bits and pieces of things, and yeah, they're going to do that as long as you can. And you're not going to get everything, um, because they're criminals. So it's like, okay, well, what can you do to recover? I would think about recovering. How do we recover fast, and how do we move forward from here? So I think
What about cold storage? What about backing this up off the cloud? so you have access to this. How, I mean, is that a practical solution? And if so, how would someone do that?
So I think that like it just depends on the situation. So like where I'm just thinking about Azel's situation here is like there's obviously some like work that goes along with this, like and how do you get back to that? It's like so just an example is like I you don't have access to your iCloud, right? And that's a primary data storage, right? So it's like okay, how do you recover from that? It's like, okay, well, you need to work through Apple, of course, but it's like maybe you have a secondary backup, right? So let me give you an example for me. Um, I have Google Photos, right? A backup for Google Photos, but I also have Amazon Photos too. So they back up in both places because if somebody in my family like just deletes it, I have it in both places. And the credentials are different from both places. So that may be a step that you take is like, okay, I have it in my iCloud and I also have it in my OneDrive. And they're two separate accounts that can connect to these things. So you may want to take a look at it like that.
So Wilson, you touched on AI, little bit ago, and obviously, AI is becoming a great tool, but it's coming with some substantial risks. You mentioned some of them. How should someone who's not technically savvy, or honestly, a startup, take advantage of these tools, but how make sure these tools don't take advantage of them?
Right. So I'm not sure how many people like are messing with Claude on the call, right? And
If you're
it's a
using
lot of
Claude, you can either post in chat or use your raise your hand, and maybe even share what AI tool you're using.
So, so if you're using Claude or Devin or any of these other tools, Claude, I mean, Codex, they're great, right? Because they just build things real fast. And you give a prompt and it just does it, right? You say, hey, I want to build an application that like shoots basketballs at a basketball net and makes it 90% of the time. It will do it, right? And it's great. And you're like, okay, I can make anything I want. I can make whatever product that I want. And the fallacy is that you, the coder, the vibe coder, are now thinking that I can be a software developer, right? And where my team has a lot of heartache is because I come up with these ideas, but then when I give it to them, it's filled with security issues that they only know about. So I think it's important for startup companies to know it's like, hey, if you are vibe coding, that's great, but you need to make sure that you have a software developer that's behind it that can look at the code like a security person and be like, there's a hole here, let me fix this. There's a hole here, let me fix this. And of course, we could say, oh, well, I'll just have Claude look at my code for security. It's just like you always need to have what they call a human in the loop, right? You got to trust, you got to trust the human knows, and you got to trust the expertise of somebody that does this as their job. But you utilize AI not as a replacement for intelligence. You use it as complementary or supplementary to your own intelligence, so you could get stuff done. And that's the way that I've been preaching it.
That's an excellent point because I see on actually on a daily basis someone who's developed something in Claude or Lovable or some other application, and sure, it's easy to get up and you hear the stories of how companies have built something and gone to market and making millions of dollars in months, but they don't look at the downside of it, the backside of it.
Right.
And honestly, for the most part, these companies don't necessarily have to raise capital. So they're risking their own time and money, not somebody else's. So, yeah, it is important to make sure that you use humans as long as we can get away with it. So,
Right, right. So like, and I'll give an example for my team, right? Like I develop applications and products for my team to use internally and that we are getting ready to go to market for, right? I create the prototype and I give it to them and then they start looking at it and they build the features, right? So what does that do? It's like, first off, I'm not a developer. I don't know too much about code. I know just enough to be dangerous, but I'm not an expert. But I do know what I want, and I do know how to create it with AI. But I also know is that I'm not an expert at software development, so I'm going to be able to use my software developers to fix that. Now, if I wanted to create the prototype before, I'd have to hire a developer, but now I don't have to do that, right?
Right.
So I could just do it myself. And now I have my developers taking my product and my features that I want, and they're able to build that to spec, right? So I've reduced time there. I've saved money, and then I've reduced like multiple headcounts because I don't need multiple software developers anymore. I could just use one or two to work
Right.
on several apps that I have.
Right. Awesome. We'll take probably one, two more questions. If you have a question, you can either raise your hand and I'll call on you, or you can post your question in chat. Let's just while the question's coming in, are there any particular, obviously you work with a lot of industries, you work with the government. What are there any particular industries or types of companies that seem to be more susceptible to a cybersecurity risk?
Ooh, yeah, definitely. Anything that has to deal with lots of sums of money. Right. So you got like finance sector, right? They're always getting slammed with cybersecurity attacks. They're always getting probed. But then you have those that are in research development and that are working on high tech stuff, highly
Mhm.
sensitive information, right? So I work with the defense sector, so they're always like there's always countries looking to find the next thing, right?
Right.
From the defense contractors that are here that are being innovative.
Mhm.
So if you're working those sectors, those are highly susceptible for cybersecurity attacks. Now, if you're like in, and I would say it's like, okay, well, if you're in, I don't want to say education is a bad example, but it's a lower, like there's not a lot of money in there, right?
Mhm.
And there's
Right.
not a lot of IP there. So, but those other industries are the ones that we see mostly the attacks for.
That's like the old saying, follow the money, and hackers are doing the same thing. So,
Right.
well,
Right.
well, Wilson, I appreciate you taking the time today. Any final thoughts or a piece of advice that you want to share with those listeners today?
Yeah, I would say that like I had a conversation the other day with a founder and he was really hell bent on like he's vibe coding his own application and he wanted to get SOC 2 compliance. And one of the things I told him was like you cannot replace humans when it comes to like change control, change management and your policies and procedures. You can't outsource that to an agent all the time. And as you scale and as you grow, the agent like taking over all of these things, you're going to have to focus on being a CEO and
Mhm.
a founder and making sure that you make deals. And there's going to be less importance on compliance. And where I see where I see challenges with his thinking is that as his company scales and grows, if you try to just outsource your cybersecurity to an agent, it's like you're accepting a lot of risk. So think about how you can incorporate humans as much as you can to protect your business. Agents are going to be able to replace a lot of things, but the humans are going to be the ones that are going to be able to call agents on their hallucinations, right? So,
Awesome. I know we got one more question, but we'll pause that for now. And what I'm going to do is thank everyone for joining us today. I will be sending a recording of this webinar to everybody. And then I put Wilson's contact information in chat. And again, thank you all for joining us. We've got more webinars coming, so reach out to me about our calendar. And again, thank you, Wilson, for joining us today.
thank you so much for having me.